The day Kayla and I received our acceptance letters to Blue Ridge University, the difference in how our family celebrated was as clear as the summer sky over Asheville. When I tore open my envelope, the words, "Congratulations, you're accepted," fluttered in my trembling hands. My parents barely glanced up. "Good for you," Dad said with a distracted nod, eyes glued to his phone. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile, but the warmth I'd hoped for never came. Then Kayla burst through the front door, waving her letter like a trophy. Her golden curls bounced with excitement as she exclaimed, "I got in too. Blue Ridge is ours." Suddenly, the kitchen transformed. Mom pulled out a homemade cake, Dad called relatives, and the house buzzed with calls, texts, and laughter. My name barely floated in the background as everyone focused on Kayla's victory. I sat at the edge of the table, clutching a glass of lemonade, trying not to let the sting show. Photos lined the walls, Kayla's smiling face in every frame. Birthday gifts neatly stacked in her room. Even the family couch seemed to curve around her, claiming her space. I watched the scene, feeling like an invisible guest in my own home. 2 weeks later, during a dinner bathed in golden evening light, Dad broke the silence. "We've decided we'll pay Kayla's tuition in full," he announced, voice steady but firm. I hesitated, heart pounding. "What about mine?" I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom offered a tight smile, eyes flickering away. "You've always been the independent one, Rachel." Dad added, "Our savings are limited. Kayla's career path is more structured. We believe investing there offers clearer returns." The words settled over me like a cold shadow. "We're investing where the return is clear." I repeated them silently, feeling the weight of rejection more keenly than any harsh rebuke. That night, unable to face the walls that seemed to close in, I drove 2 hours to Grandma Maggie's house. Tears blurred the highway lights as I clutched the steering wheel, my heart breaking but my resolve quietly hardening. I didn't tell anyone I left. I just needed to be somewhere that saw me, not the shadow beside the golden girl. Grandma Maggie's words echoed in my mind. "Some people won't see your light until it burns past their blindfold." Sitting there in her cozy kitchen, the hum of her old refrigerator and the faint scent of pine from her porch, I realized I'd have to find my own way to shine. While Kayla's move-in day was a whirlwind of matching luggage sets, heartfelt hugs, and family selfies, mine consisted of 3 worn trash bags stuffed hastily into the trunk of my beat-up sedan. I whispered a quick prayer that my brakes would hold and started the drive toward my new home, an off-campus apartment near Blue Ridge University. Summer still lingered in Asheville, pressing hot and humid against the cracked windows. My car sputtered through intersections, and as I parked near the shabby, beige apartment building, the August sun bore down without mercy. The peeling paint and rusted railings greeted me with quiet indifference, matching my mood exactly. Moving my belongings alone took 5 exhausting trips. The staircase creaked with every step, and inside the apartment, the air hung thick and still, devoid of air conditioning or mercy. Linoleum floors curled up at the edges, thin walls reverberated with muffled sounds of distant conversations, and the buzzing of cicadas formed a steady, droning symphony outside. Sweaty and tired, I stood in the empty bedroom, took a deep breath, and tried not to feel defeated. After a moment, I plugged in the single possession I'd considered essential, Grandma Maggie's old coffee maker. Its comforting hum filled the emptiness, softening the ache in my chest just slightly. On my first morning, I woke up late and instantly realized I had missed freshman orientation. My pulse quickened with panic as I stumbled around campus, overwhelmed by a maze of unfamiliar brick buildings and bustling students. By noon, I had accomplished nothing but a string of failed attempts to find the registration office. Later, as shadows lengthened and campus quieted, I collapsed back into my apartment, hunger gnawing sharply at my stomach. I rifled through the few groceries I'd brought, finally settling on a single, crumbly granola bar. Chewing in silence, I fought back tears as the laughter of new neighbors seeped through thin walls, a painful reminder of how alone I truly was. That night, I stared at the ceiling until exhaustion overtook me, my worries washing silently down my face in the dark. The next morning, determined to gain control, I lined up outside the financial aid office, a windowless room where the smell of instant coffee and resignation mingled. Miss Green, the financial aid officer, had the worn look of someone who'd seen far too many worried faces. Still, when she handed me a packet outlining loans and work-study opportunities, her tired smile gave me a sliver of hope. "You're not alone," she told me gently. "You'll get through this, one day at a time." I left her office clutching paperwork and the small comfort of her words. That afternoon, I landed a job at the campus cafe and applied to the bookstore a block away. With each step towards self-reliance, I felt stronger, even if only slightly. Days became blurs of work, class schedules, and aching feet. I occasionally glimpsed Kayla on social media, her posts filled with carefree grins and late-night dorm room pizzas. Each photo was a tiny pinprick in my heart, reminders of the easy happiness I couldn't afford. One evening, after a particularly exhausting shift, I dragged myself home. The apartment was quiet and dark except for a dim glow from the kitchen. On the counter, I found a Tupperware container filled with rice and beans, topped by a bright yellow sticky note. "Eat me, smiley face, N." I stared at the note, confused but touched. The kindness felt foreign after weeks of silent struggle. As I ate, savoring the warm spices, I heard footsteps approach. I turned around, meeting the calm eyes of a girl my age, holding a mug of tea and wearing an easy smile. "You look like you forget to eat." "I'm Nia," she said simply, leaning casually against the counter. "Rachel," I replied softly, feeling unexpectedly shy. "Thanks for the food." "Really?" She shrugged, unfazed. "My mom taught me feeding people is like planting seeds, good things grow from it." Something about her quiet confidence relaxed me. I smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. Our talk turned easy, small anecdotes and shared struggles about professors and difficult textbooks. In the brief exchange, I glimpsed the start of something I'd long needed: friendship. That night, after Nia returned to her room, I pulled out my battered notebook to calculate my monthly budget. Numbers filled page after page, each more discouraging than the last. Rent, textbooks, food, transport. After careful subtraction, I was left staring numbly at the stark figure. Exactly $87 to last me until next month. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. Grandma Maggie's voice echoed in my memory, whispered on my last birthday as she slipped $40 into my card. "Survive first, then soar." Those words, etched gently in my heart, began to ground me. I had survived today. Tomorrow I would try again. The next evening, sitting cross-legged on the worn living room rug, I sipped instant coffee from Maggie's old machine. Nia walked by, glanced at my open notebook, and nodded knowingly. "Budgeting?" she asked gently. "Surviving," I admitted, forcing a weak smile. She paused thoughtfully, then sank down beside me. "You know," she began softly, "I've seen people crumble with less on their plates than yours. But you've got that grit look, like you'll outwork everyone else." She nudged my shoulder lightly. "Just don't forget to breathe." Her words lingered after she left, wrapping around me like a comforting shawl. In the silence of the apartment, the sounds of distant traffic and cicadas filtering through, I realized I was no longer entirely alone. Yes, it was just a beginning, a small seed planted by an unexpected kindness, but it was enough. I knew my path would be tough, that $87 wouldn't stretch far. But as Grandma Maggie always reminded me, tough times only sharpen the strength you carried within. So I closed the notebook, stood up, and stared out the window into the warm Asheville night. The world outside was full of unknown challenges, but for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to face them. Tomorrow, I would survive. After that, I would learn to soar. Kayla's face smiled brightly from student government flyers plastered all over campus. Her photo, perfectly captured, radiated confidence and charisma. Beside her image, bold letters encouraged everyone, "Vote Kayla Moore for Student Body Vice President." I stood beneath one of those flyers in the bustling hallway, briefly staring into my sister's glossy smile before refocusing my attention back to the open laptop in my arms. My own screen wasn't filled with flashy campaign slogans, but instead displayed a neatly organized spreadsheet of my fledgling clients, who had paid, who still owed me, and what tasks remained unfinished. Spring had arrived on the Blue Ridge campus, filling the quad with cherry blossoms and bright sunshine, yet I barely had time to notice. I moved swiftly between classes, study lounges, and shifts at the cafe, my worn sneakers barely keeping pace with my frantic schedule. I carried with me a growing exhaustion, but also a newfound purpose. My ambitions were no longer merely survival, I was building something. In my small business management class, Professor Carter often spoke with an intensity that held our attention captive. One morning, pacing at the front of the lecture hall, he declared with his usual passion, "Real leaders don't ask for the title. They build things people depend on." His eyes landed on mine for just a moment, and it felt like he saw straight through my quiet facade, directly into my resolve. That simple sentence echoed in my head as I headed back to my cramped apartment later that afternoon. Surrounded by my textbooks, a coffee mug, and scribbled notes, an idea began to spark. Why not formalize it? Nia asked that evening as we sat across from each other at our small kitchen table, her dark eyes thoughtful. "You already manage half the lives around you for free." She raised an eyebrow, playful yet serious. "Start charging." Encouraged by her words, I stayed up that night, crafting a simple website under the glow of my old desk lamp. After hours of staring at the screen, tweaking fonts and organizing my services clearly, I took a deep breath and typed the name into the header, "More Virtual Solutions." The name held quiet pride, symbolizing my claim on something entirely my own. By the time dawn peeked through the curtains, the site was live. Tired but exhilarated, I fell asleep feeling, for the first time in months, a sense of genuine accomplishment. Nia surprised me a few days later by designing a logo, sleek, simple, and professional. "It's very Rachel," she said proudly, tapping my screen. Sharp, understated, quietly fierce. I laughed, feeling the warmth of real friendship, something I had barely known before meeting her. Within days, my first real client appeared, a frazzled Etsy shop owner named Sarah. She desperately needed help managing emails that piled up faster than she could answer them. My heart fluttered nervously when she agreed to my modest fee of $80 to clean out her inbox and set up organized folders. As soon as Sarah's payment hit my account, I reinvested the entire amount into better Wi-Fi, a small yet powerful upgrade that made me feel more professional instantly. From that point, my confidence grew steadily with each completed task and grateful client review. Professor Carter's class soon became more than just lessons. It turned into a network. After one lecture, he caught me gathering my notes and asked quietly, "Rachel, can you help me organize the annual economics conference notes this year? It's a mess and I need someone reliable." I nodded eagerly, gratitude evident in my eyes. After finishing the task ahead of schedule, he introduced me to a local realtor who needed urgent assistance organizing client appointments. Before long, one client became two, then three, each bringing their own challenges, each met with quiet determination. My days became a tightrope walk, balancing classes, work shifts, client deadlines, and endless studying. Sometimes, late at night, I'd glimpse Kayla's social media posts, always bright smiles at parties or surrounded by friends. She embodied a college experience that felt alien to me. While she thrived in crowds, I worked alone beneath flickering apartment lights, negotiating printer ink replacements and politely demanding overdue payments. One evening, after negotiating a slightly higher rate with a client, I collapsed onto my bed, utterly drained but undeniably proud. Nia poked her head into my room, assessing the scene. "Still alive," she joked gently. "Barely," I said, laughing despite my fatigue. "But I got the raise I asked for." She grinned broadly. "See? You're quietly fierce. CEO in training." It was the first time I said it out loud. I run a business. The words felt surreal yet exhilarating. One afternoon, walking past the student center, I saw Kayla celebrating her student government victory with a crowd of cheering friends. I felt distant, not jealous exactly, but aware of the different worlds we occupied. My leadership didn't come with flyers or cheers. It was solitary, quiet, and deeply personal. Later that night, hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table, Nia gently tapped my shoulder, placing a bright green sticky note on the fridge behind me. Glancing up, I read her scrawled encouragement aloud, "CEO vibes only. Don't shrink." She nodded seriously. "Don't ever forget that." I felt tears prick my eyes, tears of relief, gratitude, and something new. Pride. My path might have been lonelier, less glamorous, but it was mine alone. The invisible walls that once made me feel trapped now seemed more like quiet boundaries of strength, defining me clearly. At 20, my life didn't match the bright flyers or vibrant parties plastered across campus. Instead, it was ink cartridges ordered at 3 a.m., satisfied clients sending thank you emails, and late-night coffee brewed strong and bitter. Yet, in this quiet determination, I had begun to truly lead myself. Professor Carter's voice whispered again in my memory, confirming my silent realization. I didn't need a title, just results that spoke for themselves. I closed my laptop, stretched tired muscles, and allowed myself to rest briefly, knowing tomorrow would again demand my best effort. On the fridge, Nia's note glowed like a tiny beacon, "CEO vibes only." I repeated those words silently, drawing quiet strength from their truth. In that modest kitchen, in that ordinary moment, I knew I had found something far better than applause. I discovered my own power. She stood in my doorway, eyes swollen and red, holding a thick stack of papers. Her mascara streaked down pale cheeks, a shadow of her usual confidence. It took me a moment to even recognize my younger sister, the golden girl, the one my parents proudly declared would go far. Now here she was, unraveling at the seams, asking me for help. I hesitated, gripping the door tighter, the ache of old wounds rising like ghosts. Kayla and I hadn't spoken properly in months. I'd only seen snippets of her bright-eyed senior year through social media posts, parties, club meetings, cheerful selfies captioned, "Last semester, best semester." Meanwhile, I'd been buried in my tiny apartment, drafting marketing proposals at 2 a.m., struggling to keep clients happy, grades high, and bills paid. Her world had always seemed distant, charmed, safe. "Rachel," she whispered, voice shaking, "my thesis. They rejected it. I only have 3 weeks to rewrite everything or I'll fail." Her shoulders trembled, and the weight of her fear was palpable. My chest tightened, emotions colliding in quiet turmoil. The memories I'd locked away came flooding back, the silent dinners, ignored accomplishments, and empty promises. My instinct was to close the door, let her navigate alone as I had done. But instead, I stepped aside quietly, letting her in. Kayla entered hesitantly, glancing around my modest apartment, the walls covered in neatly aligned sticky notes and a whiteboard scribbled with deadlines and tasks. The tea kettle hissed softly in the kitchen, filling the silence. I motioned for her to sit, noticing her slight embarrassment as she perched on my faded second-hand sofa. "So, what exactly happened?" I asked cautiously, keeping distance in my voice. She exhaled shakily, words tumbling out in a rush. "Professor Henley said my research is fundamentally flawed. She told me my thesis lacked substance. It's just surface-level analysis." Her voice dropped, eyes filling with fresh tears. "I don't even know what that means." Listening, I felt a familiar pang of empathy despite myself. I knew exactly how brutal a professor's critique could feel, the crushing weight of inadequacy. Before I could respond, the door opened again. Nia stepped in, grocery bags in hand, eyes immediately narrowing at Kayla. Nia had heard all my late-night rants over family favoritism and knew exactly who Kayla was to me. She gave Kayla a guarded nod before glancing pointedly in my direction, skepticism clear. "I'll be in the kitchen," Nia said calmly, not needing to say more. Her subtle warning hovered between us. "Don't let yourself be used again." I don't know where to start," Kayla said softly, nervously twisting a bracelet on her wrist. "You're so good at managing everything." "You always were. Could you maybe help me fix this?" I paused, heart hammering. Years of bitterness pressed against me, memories clawing for attention. But Kayla looked so vulnerable, stripped of her usual ease. In that moment, something deeper took precedence, a quiet compassion. Yet I knew if I was going to help, it would be on my terms. "I'll help you," I said firmly, "but I have rules. We follow my schedule. You work when I say work. No excuses." She nodded immediately, relief flooding her expression. "Yes, absolutely. Whatever you say." We started that evening, side by side at my small kitchen table. The tea grew cold, and silence stretched between clicks of keyboards and flipping of pages. Nia hovered nearby, quietly observing, a silent guardian to ensure I held my boundaries. Slowly, Kayla relaxed into the structured rhythm I provided, task lists, milestones, and clear expectations. One evening, as the clock passed midnight and tiredness blurred our vision, Kayla finally broke the silence. "Rachel, can I ask you something?" Her voice was small, hesitant. I looked up warily. "Sure. How did you do all of this?" She gestured vaguely at the room, organized notes, client folders, textbooks. "How did you build it without any support?" I stared at her a moment, emotions conflicting, part pride, part quiet sadness. "I didn't really have a choice," I said gently, surprising myself with honesty. I worked 60-hour weeks, skipped meals, studied until sunrise. There were nights I nearly dropped out because the pressure was overwhelming, but quitting felt impossible. I had nobody to catch me. Kayla was silent, her eyes wide, absorbing each word carefully. I didn't know it was that hard for you. I didn't exactly advertise, I replied softly, focusing again on my screen. Who would have listened? Quiet filled the room, punctuated by the gentle hum of the fridge. For the first time, my sister seemed truly reflective, her usual confidence replaced with genuine humility. I think she finally began, her voice shaky. I believed them, Mom and Dad, when they treated you like your choices were inferior. Like you couldn't possibly succeed because you didn't follow their path. Her voice cracked. But I was wrong, Rachel. They were wrong. I see now everything you built by yourself. And it's incredible. Her words hung in the quiet air between us, heavy with sincerity and regret. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that until now. Yet, I didn't rush to embrace her. Forgiveness didn't come easy. It couldn't. Not yet. Still, I felt something inside me loosen, a small step toward healing wounds I'd carried too long. Kayla, sensing my reserved response, nodded slowly. She opened her notebook and picked up her pen, the gesture oddly earnest. Tell me what to do next, she whispered, eyes now focused and serious. I stood quietly, printed off a fresh checklist from my desk, and handed it to her. Let's fix this, I said calmly, meeting her eyes steadily. But it won't be easy. You'll have to work harder than you ever have. She took the paper, studying it carefully. Her posture straightened as she began writing notes in the margins, something new emerging in her face. Determination. Later, when Kayla had left, I sank onto the couch, exhausted. Mia joined me quietly, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. That took strength, she murmured. Just remember, helping doesn't mean forgetting. I know, I said softly, but maybe it means moving forward. That night, alone in my small room, I stared at the ceiling, contemplating the difficult path I'd chosen. Kayla's acknowledgement had lifted a burden slightly, but I knew the real journey of forgiveness lay ahead, winding and uncertain. I thought of Grandma Maggie's quiet wisdom, how people sometimes only recognize your value once you've moved beyond their narrow sight. Maybe that was Kayla now, finally glimpsing beyond her blindfold. Sleep came gently, and as I drifted off, I knew tomorrow would demand all my strength. But tonight, for once, peace held me close, whispering a quiet reassurance. I'd chosen kindness over bitterness, despite everything, and in doing so, reclaimed something of myself. My sister had come to me in crisis. The choice had been mine, and I chose the harder path, the one that might lead to healing. When my name echoed across the packed auditorium, I didn't glance toward the brightly lit stage. Instead, I watched their faces, my heartbeat drowning out the applause for just a moment. My parents sat stiffly, Dad adjusting his tie, Mom smoothing her skirt, both wearing expressions caught between confusion and disbelief. Beside them, Grandma Maggie glowed with quiet pride, while Kayla was already smiling warmly, knowing what was about to unfold. Earlier that week, Grandma had mailed me a delicate silk stole, beautifully embroidered in shimmering gold thread. Diamonds form under pressure. Shine loud. I wore it now beneath my graduation gown, feeling the comforting weight of her faith in me. The late May sun beat down gently over Blue Ridge University's outdoor stadium, hats and sunglasses glinting, cameras flashing, children fidgeting. Rows of folding chairs stretched in orderly lines, filled with families who'd gathered to celebrate their graduates. My turn had finally come, not just to walk the stage, but to speak to all of them. Dean Grant introduced me warmly, her voice clear and confident, filling the stadium with authority and sincerity. Rachel Moore has not only achieved the highest academic distinction, but she also embodies the resilience and quiet courage our university deeply values. Stepping forward, I took a steadying breath, looking out over hundreds of faces. My voice was calm, clear, but beneath the surface I trembled. Today, we celebrate more than just degrees earned. We celebrate journeys taken. I began, eyes briefly connecting with my grandmother's gentle smile. Some paths are smooth and guided, while others are carved out through late nights, early mornings, and quiet determination. The audience grew still, drawn in by something deeper than standard graduation platitudes. I learned early that not all support is equal. Many of you know what it feels like to stand alone. But standing alone taught me the value of strength and the truth of self-worth. Every achievement, every step, every success, I earned them with sweat, tears, and countless moments of doubt. A gentle murmur rippled through the crowd, heads nodding softly. I took a breath, allowing myself a vulnerable pause. I learned that validation doesn't come from those unwilling to see us. It comes from knowing our value even if no one else does. When I finished, applause rose immediately, warm, genuine, louder than polite formality required. It grew steadily, sustained by strangers who had heard something honest and recognized it in their own lives. The sound enveloped me, soothing old wounds and affirming quiet truths I'd carried silently for years. Dean Grant returned, smiling broadly. "There is more," she announced, voice rich with pride. Rachel is also this year's recipient of the National Collegiate Innovation Award, one of the highest honors in student entrepreneurship. She paused deliberately. Remarkably, she achieved this entirely without family financial support. Gasps and whispers erupted in the crowd. Instinctively, I glanced toward my family again. My parents had visibly shrunk back into their seats, faces reddening, eyes lowered. I felt no triumph at their discomfort, only a calm recognition that the truth had finally been spoken aloud. Then something remarkable happened. Kayla stood first, clapping boldly, her eyes shining with a pride I'd never seen from her before. Grandma Maggie followed, rising slowly, radiating satisfaction. Soon, others joined, the applause now thunderous and overwhelming. Tears blurred my vision, not from sadness, but from profound relief. As the ceremony ended, I retreated backstage to regain composure. Leaning against the cool concrete wall, eyes closed briefly, I heard footsteps approach. Opening them slowly, I found my father standing awkwardly beside my mother. Both wore strained, uneasy expressions. "Rachel," Dad began haltingly, fumbling with his words, "why didn't you tell us about all this? The awards, your business." Quietly, I met his uncertain gaze. "You never asked." He flinched subtly, eyes flickering downward. Mom pressed her lips tightly, seemingly unable to speak. "You were always so independent," Dad said, voice barely above a whisper. "Independence wasn't a choice," I said gently but firmly. "It was my survival." They stood in silence, reality settling heavily between us. Before they could respond, Kayla appeared, stepping decisively to my side. She slipped an arm around my shoulders, a gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes. "Rachel earned every bit of this on her own," Kayla said simply. "You miss seeing her clearly, but everyone else did today." My parents stood quietly, faced now with both daughters united, perhaps seeing clearly for the first time the cost of their choices. I didn't linger in their discomfort. Forgiveness would take time, if it came at all. But today wasn't for bitterness, it was for affirmation. As they drifted away, Grandma Maggie approached, taking my hand in hers, warmth radiating from her grasp. "You shone loud today," she whispered, squeezing my hand gently. "I'm so proud." A young woman with a notebook and badge approached cautiously, smiling warmly. "Rachel, I'm from the University magazine. Your story is incredibly inspiring. Could we feature your journey in our next issue?" I hesitated briefly, glancing toward my grandmother and sister, both encouraging with quiet nods. "Only if it helps someone else," I said finally, returning the reporter's smile with quiet sincerity. When everyone had gone, I sat alone for a moment in the gentle afternoon breeze, still wearing Grandma's embroidered stole. The weight of the day settled gently around me, not heavy, but freeing. In that quiet solitude, I knew my life had reached a turning point. I'd spent years quietly proving myself in shadows. Today, in front of hundreds, the shadows lifted completely. I'd shown myself clearly to everyone, and perhaps for the first time, truly seen myself as well. Validation hadn't come easily, but it had arrived in full measure. The applause still echoed softly in my ears as I rose slowly, ready to leave. Grandma Maggie waited near the exit, eyes twinkling. Kayla stood nearby, transformed by sincerity and newfound respect. My parents lingered uncertainly at the edge of our family circle, humbled by clarity they hadn't expected. Outside, sunlight bathed the campus warmly, like a silent promise. The path ahead wasn't fully clear, yet I stepped forward without hesitation. I had found my worth alone, built strength from struggle, and reclaimed dignity in the face of doubt. Today was the culmination not just of my education, but of something deeper, a journey toward authenticity, resilience, and quiet courage. The applause had finally reached me, not merely from the crowd, but from within. They offered to help me with my new apartment, standing awkwardly in my doorway, holding out a small white envelope. It was the first real gesture they'd made since graduation, though it came several years too late. I smiled gently and shook my head. "Thanks, but I've already signed the lease on my own terms." My voice held no anger, just clarity. Mom lowered the envelope, glancing nervously at Dad. He cleared his throat, embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "We thought you could use some help getting settled," he explained quietly. I softened my stance a little. "I appreciate the thought, really. But I've managed okay so far." I paused, adding softly, "I needed to." Later that night, I unpacked boxes in my cozy new apartment, the walls freshly painted, sunlight streaming through open windows. The signing bonus from my new consulting job had allowed this independence. Carefully tucked inside my graduation stole, I found Grandma Maggie's card, the edges worn from repeated readings. "Family is who claps when you win, and also when you fail." I smiled, holding those words gently, as the email notification popped up. Blue Ridge University had just awarded the first ever More Resilient Scholarship, named after me, to a student named Julia Martinez, a young woman working 2 jobs and caring for siblings, whose journey echoed my own. My chest swelled softly, pride mingled with a quiet sense of closure. A week later, my parents invited me over for a small backyard cookout, smaller, quieter than past years. There were no elaborate decorations, just simple string lights and the scent of charcoal drifting on the breeze. Kayla was already there, smiling broadly, comfortable now in her role at a nonprofit advocating educational equity. Grandma Maggie sat contentedly in a wicker chair, her eyes twinkling with quiet understanding as she watched me approach. After polite small talk, Dad awkwardly held out another envelope, a check for $500, labeled neatly graduation gift. "We wanted to do something," Mom offered hesitantly. I accepted it gently, examining the neat handwriting, then looked up again. "It means something you offered. But honestly, I don't need this now." I handed it back carefully. "I'd rather you use it to support someone else who's starting out." Before they could respond, Uncle Brian strode over, his voice hearty and unfiltered as always. "Rachel," he boomed, pulling me into an affectionate hug. "I've been telling everyone at work about your big award. Why'd it take me so long to hear about it? You're practically famous." My parents shifted uneasily, and a silence fell briefly over our small group. Uncle Brian noticed immediately, his smile fading slightly. "Wait, did nobody know how amazing Rachel's been doing?" Kayla stepped forward, gently but firmly. "Rachel's achieved everything on her own. She deserves every bit of praise." My mother's eyes welled up suddenly, emotions breaking through years of composed restraint. Dad cleared his throat, voice thick with unspoken regret. "Rachel, we misjudged. We didn't see clearly. And we're sorry." Everyone stood still, watching me closely. I felt the weight of their expectation, waiting for the easy forgiveness, the confetti moment that could wrap everything neatly. But I knew forgiveness wasn't simple like that, not after years of silent struggles, unseen battles, quiet victories. I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. Acknowledging it as a start, I finally said, meeting their eyes calmly. "But I'm not here to fix that part of the story anymore." Dad's gaze softened, quietly accepting my words. Mom nodded slightly, understanding something deeper now. They seemed smaller, humbled, yet perhaps wiser for it. Grandma Maggie reached out gently, squeezing my hand in silent approval. Beside her, Kayla's face showed quiet pride. Later, as the sun dipped low, I helped clear plates and cups with Grandma and Kayla, the comforting sounds of family conversation drifting around us. My phone buzzed softly. I glanced down, an email from a National Youth Leadership Organization. "We'd like to invite you to be our keynote speaker. Your journey embodies the strength and resilience we aim to inspire." I stared at the message, heart swelling gently. Grandma noticed my expression and smiled knowingly. "You're ready for that, Rachel," she said softly. "The world deserves to hear your voice." Kayla nodded firmly. "This time, don't hold anything back." "I won't," I said quietly, feeling the truth of that promise deeply. After everyone had gone home, I stayed behind briefly in my parents' quiet backyard, stars flickering gently above. I understood now that forgiveness wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single moment of celebration or a neatly tied ribbon at the end of the story. It was quiet, incremental, layered. Forgiveness, as Grandma Maggie taught me, was never about excusing someone else's mistakes, but about releasing myself from the bitterness that might otherwise trap me. I had grown not in spite of the past, but because of it, every setback quietly shaping the person I became. It wasn't easy or simple, but it was mine. As I stood beneath the gentle night sky, surrounded by the echoes of the evening, I felt a quiet, undeniable freedom. I'd let go not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. I would always carry those memories, but they would no longer weigh me down. At home later, I settled into my apartment, made tea, and opened the scholarship email again, reading Julia's grateful words carefully. It was strange to think that my own struggles had now become someone else's opportunity. My phone lit up with a video call. Nia's cheerful face filled the screen. "So, are you finally a big-time speaker now?" she teased warmly. "Apparently so," I laughed, genuinely lighthearted, though it feels surreal. "Trust me, Rachel," she said warmly, "you've earned every moment." Later, as sleep came gently, I closed my eyes, replaying Grandma's words, "Family is who claps when you win and also when you fail." I had finally built that family. Grandma Maggie, Kayla, Nia, even Uncle Brian. They'd seen my victories and failures clearly. They'd chosen to stand with me, not because they were obligated, but because they saw my worth, genuinely and fully. My parents would always be part of the story, but the narrative was mine now, defined not by their mistakes, but by my own quiet victories. Forgiveness wasn't a confetti moment, but maybe it wasn't supposed to be. It was quiet strength, gentle clarity, and careful boundaries. As I drifted off, I knew tomorrow and every day after would hold new challenges. But for the first time, I wasn't facing them to prove something. Instead, I faced them knowing exactly who I was, shaped and whole. I would speak at the Youth Leadership Summit, not to prove anything to anyone, but because my story could help someone else find their own voice. As I looked up at the sky that night, my heart felt lighter, understanding that forgiveness is not something as easy or quick as throwing confetti to celebrate, but a gentle journey of letting go. In families, sometimes we lose each other not because of a lack of love, but because we forget how to listen and appreciate our differences. If we know how to stop and look at each other again with gentler eyes, maybe the old hurts will give way to love to return. If this story reminds you of someone dear to you, please share your feelings below. I would love to hear and accompany you on this journey.